for the dry out at 1747.
Good morning and happy Thanksgiving
Copy.
from Mission
Thank
Control
you.
in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center. At this hour, here in the control room, we've just had a shift handover. Orbit 1 handing over to the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers as we prepare for the opening of the hatches between the newly arrived Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft and its 3 crew members and the International Space Station's 73 crew, the Expedition 73 crew, who will greet them as the newly arrived trio, NASA's Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kud-Sverchkov and Sergei Mikheyev begin their 8 months aboard the orbital outpost. It has been about 2 hours and 16 minutes since the docking occurred of the Soyuz MS-28 to the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The docking occurring at 6:34 a.m. Central Time, 7:34 a.m. Eastern Time, a flawless 3-hour and 7-minute journey following launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
Is the pressure on the side of the ISS? You can close RPV-1, closed. Prep command S5 in work.
The journey of the Soyuz MS-28 began at 3:27 and 57 seconds a.m. Central Time. It was 2:27 and 57 seconds p.m. at the launch site in Baikonur as the main engines lit up on the Soyuz 2.1A booster. The Soyuz lifted off, then arced out to the northeast over the Central Asian desert from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on an 8-minute, 46-second trip to deposit the Soyuz spacecraft and its 3 occupants into its preliminary orbit. The climb to orbit by the 3-stage Soyuz booster was flawless. Everything went by the book, and after the Soyuz separated from the 3rd stage of the Soyuz rocket, it deployed its navigational antennas and solar arrays, and the chase to catch up to the International Space Station was underway.
S6 is ready. And LED is no longer illuminated.
With the Soyuz having executed a number of mid-course correction burns that were pre-planned and automatically arrived in the neighborhood of the International Space Station, the Soyuz slowly but surely eased its way toward the Rassvet module, eventually linking up at 6:34 a.m. Central Time, 7:34 a.m. Eastern Time, the docking occurring in perfect fashion. No issues reported whatsoever, setting the stage for hooks to be closed to form a hard mate between the Soyuz and the Rassvet module. Now, over the course of the past 2 hours and 16 minutes or so, there have been leak checks and pressure checks conducted on both sides of the docking interface, with Soyuz commander, or rather Space Station Commander Sergei Ryzhikov conducting those leak checks on the Rassvet side of the docking interface, and the leak checks being conducted by Soyuz Commander Sergei Kud-Sverchkov on the Soyuz side of the docking interface at the Rassvet module. Those leak checks and pressure checks to equalize pressure across the docking interface are about to come to a close. That will set the stage for the Expedition 73 crew to greet their Soyuz counterparts and to greet them on board in the vestibule, if you will, of the Rassvet module of the International Space Station. Once the hatches are open between the 2 vehicles, the newly arrived trio of Chris Williams, Sergei Kud-Sverchkov, and Sergei Mikheyev, they will make their way along with the Expedition 73 crew to the Zvezda service module. They'll don headsets and receive congratulatory calls from Russian space officials at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow and the town of Korolyov, as well as the spacecraft communicator here in Mission Control in Houston.
Station Moscow, space to ground 2 for hatch opening.
This view showing in the foreground the newly arrived Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft on board in the descent module. Chris Williams, Sergei Kudryavtsev, and Sergei Mikheyev are completing their pressure checks prior to the time that they'll be given permission to open the hatch between the Soyuz and the Rassvet module. At the top of your screen, at the adjacent docking port, which is the Prishal node module, also on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station, is the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft that will be the ride home in about a week and a half or so for Johnny Kim of NASA and Roscosmos cosmonauts Alexei Zabritsky and Sergei Ryzhikov, who will be heading for a parachute-assisted landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. That will be late in the evening of December 8th U.S. time, early in the morning of December 9th on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
We are AOS on KU band. We'll start hatch opening.
МКС Тупо Москва ВСГ 2.
Station Moscow, space to ground 2 for Sergei.
Тупо Москва.
Эти крючки там.
Moscow station. Space to ground 2.
Тупо Москва ВСГ 2 для Сергея по открытию.
Station Moscow for Sergei on space to ground 2 for hatch opening.
The Russian flight controllers of the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow are preparing to bring us inside the Rassvet module at the hatchway to the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft for hatch opening. We should be ready for all of that once we pass a handover in our tracking and data relay satellite system that we will lose the downlink video from the station for. It will only last a couple of minutes before we regain that KU capability, and then we'll be ready for hatch opening. And the greeting by the Expedition 73 crew of the newly arrived trio aboard the Soyuz MS-28, who will take up residence on the station for the next 8 months. Again, we're standing by for the opening of the hatches between the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft and the Rassvet module on board the International Space Station. It was a flawless ride from the launch pad in Baikonur toward the docking at the Rassvet module for NASA's Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kudryavtsev, the Soyuz commander, and his board engineer, Sergei Mikheyev. Once those hatches are opened, the population of the International Space Station will rise to 10. continuing the permanent human occupancy of the International Space Station that began on November 2nd, 2000, with the arrival on board of the Expedition 1 crew, Bill Shepard, Sergei Krikalev, and Yuri Gitzenko.
Station Moscow, Space to Ground 2. For hatch opening or head-on Space to Ground 2, how do you read me? Yes, sir. We're back, IOS. In MRM-1, you may activate the camera and open the MRM-1 SU hatch. Copy.
And we're just moments away from regaining our downlink television capability from the station. Once we do, we'll be on board in the Rassvet module to watch the work being done on the station side of the docking interface by Sergei Ryzhikov, the station commander, as he works to open the station hatch. That'll be followed by the opening of the Soyuz hatch by Sergei Kud-Sverchkov. The International Space Station is currently flying 260 miles above the South Pacific, having begun a southwest to northeasterly track that will carry it across the northwest coast of South America a short time from now. And you can see on the front screen here in Mission Control, the International Space Station is being portrayed by an icon of a turkey in celebration of this Thanksgiving Day.
Moscow Station, Space to Ground 2. The MRM-1 SU hatch is open. And pressurization valve is in electrical control. MRM-1 SU